Totally, dude.
Yeah, so Mike, thanks for coming out, man. I really
My pleasure.
excited that you came out here on a Saturday. It's a nice day. Unfortunately, the traffic, but
Yeah, the traffic was a little interesting getting down here, but here we are.
yeah, we are.
Arrive alive.
Yeah, thank God. Yeah. So let's start off with who you are and what you do for a living. Like, what's your job?
Sure, Mike McLean. If I'm on set and there's about 15 other Mikes, like there usually is down here, I go by Michael, but Mike McLean, I'm a focus puller in the motion picture film industry.
Okay, and what is a focus puller? Like, what's for in image terms? What does that job do?
Well, it's focus pulling has sort of evolved from the time that I first started pulling focus to what it is today. But essentially, whatever you're photographing, the focus pullers have to keep that subject or object in focus without having the luxury of being able to, back in the old days, look through the camera. Nowadays, with digital capture and digital photography, we can look at monitors to focus and see and make sure that whatever the camera is shooting stays in focus. So we're in control of the lens.
But you're not operating the camera.
No. The camera typically has an operator, unless sometimes it's locked off. So the focus puller is sort of off on his own to the side and pulling focus on the subjects that the cameras are shooting.
So how did you do it back in the day, and how is it different now?
Back in the day.
And what year is that, by the way?
Yeah, well, hopefully, back in the day. So here I am dating myself. So when I came up working in the motion picture industry, I came up working with film cameras. There really weren't digital cameras back then.
Oh, wow.
Video was just sort of starting to come out, but, it's funny. I can't even remember the names of some of the video cameras when they first came out, like maybe Betacam or something like that. But predominantly everything was shot, if not exclusively, on film. Mm. And, back then, the operator had their hands full, literally operating the camera, because they would use what's called a gear head, and that gear head would be operated pan and tilt with a gear-driven wheel system. And so,
like a crank, you mean?
Yeah, like a crank for tilt and a crank for pan. And so the focus puller would literally sit next to the operator while the operator was looking through the eyepiece. The focus puller would take measurements of the actor. And if the actor was at 8 feet, the focus puller would hence and have the lens at 8 feet so that it would be in focus. So anytime the actor would be moving, depending if they were moving away or moving closer, the focus puller is to adjust accordingly, turn the lens closer if the actor's moving closer and further away if the actor's moving further away, and keep that distance on the lens to match exactly where the actor is according to the camera.
But back then, because nowadays...
All while not having the luxury of looking through the eyepiece. So we would have to say, there we are.
Because I was going to ask, how did you pull focus when there wasn't a monitor? And not only not have the monitor, but today the system is wireless. You got all this stuff. Back then, what was the thing like when you were pulling focus? What was the machine? Is it still rudimentary?
It was a engineered piece of equipment called a follow focus, and it would attach itself to the camera, so to speak. It was a gear-driven system that had a gearing on it that would match the pitch of the gears on the lens, and you would turn it in accordance with where the talent was. Mm-hmm. And the lens having distance marks on it, typically from like infinity to, let's just say the close focus was 5 feet, you would keep that lens on the distance mark wherever that matched the actor. So if the actor was 20 feet away, the lens was at 20 feet. And if the actor was going to walk from, say, 20 feet to 6 feet, you would measure out 20 feet to 6 feet from the camera. You would know where 20 feet is, 15 feet. 10 feet, 8, 6, and you would mark those on the lens. Mm-hmm. And when the actor walked towards the camera, you would, when that actor reached that mark, you would have to match that mark on the lens. So,
and make sure they're focused.
Yes.
And what if you fucked up and you didn't get focused.
Well, yeah, that's the great part about being a focus puller is when it's not right, believe me, they'll let you know it. And if it is, nobody tells you. So the old saying, "No news is good news," certainly applies. But back in the day of filmmaking, you really relied on your operator and your operator's eye to be able to look through the camera and the lens. And sometimes it was not easy for them because there'd be a lot of filtration in front, plus the spinning shutter of the camera. When the shutter spins, you essentially only see the image half the time, right? Because the shutter spins, it has a mirror and a pellicle system, shoots that image up to the operator's eye. They see the image, then it spins around again, it captures the film. So, the operator with the shutter moving around in their eye, looking through an eyepiece, a lot of times through, filtration and the stop being exposed and a closed iris, you'd really have to rely on a good operator to say, hey, you kind of missed it there coming around the corner, or...
right, because you're just judging it based on feet. You're not seeing anything.
Correct.
Damn, that must have been tough back then, boy.
It was tough, but the process was so different back then in the sense that the workflow was okay. The camera assistant gets time to get their marks. The director of photography gets time to light the scene. The actors, they come out and they rehearse the scene, and then when they go back into wardrobe and makeup, the rest of the crew finishes lighting, finishes setting up the camera.
And you would block scenes too, right?
They block the scenes and rehearse the scenes, which is called what was called second team, which were the stand-ins rather for the main actors. So essentially by the time the main actors came back on set, you'd done the shot already several times,
right? Through
rehearsal, through blocking, through tweaking, and a lot of times the actors would come back and they'd want to rehearse a couple, because not only are they getting made up and getting dressed, they're rehearsing their lines. So they want to come out on set and maybe rehearse a couple of takes first. So you had that luxury of doing a shot several times before you even put it on film.
And back then,
it's not like today where you just turn the camera on and roll.
And it's digital, because I was going to get to that. Because today's digital, you got memory cards that can give you hours of footage, but back then with film cameras...
If it's an old memory card, though, it starts to lose its memory. It forgets a lot.
Yeah, probably, and it probably doesn't register 4K or any of that crap.
I don't even register anything now. I'm 58.
So when you were doing these jobs back then, was it around the 70s, I'm assuming?
No.
80s?
It's funny.
So how did you get your start? Let's go back. How did you start?
Well, when I was a kid, I loved photography. I loved sports, and I always thought, man, I wish there was a way to kind of do sports and photography. And, I'd always kind of wanted to parlay that into some sort of like either broadcasting or working for a sports network or something like that. And so I ended up going to Florida State, make a long story short, and it was prior to Florida State having a film program there. So what I did was I worked on what was called media production back then, which was a little bit of everything: radio, theater, film history, music scoring for film, editing, writing, advertising, just sort of all-encompassing.
Yeah, very broad.
All-encompassing. And, I kept sort of, meandering my way down the tunnel, if you will, and I kept coming back to anything that had to do with cameras and anything that had to do with film. I loved it. That and radio. And I worked at the radio station while I was there as well, doing sports. But when I graduated, my counselor said, hey, I got an internship for you at a production company in Miami Beach.
Oh, nice.
And I didn't hear anything that he said. All I heard was Miami Beach. And, never having been to Miami Beach before, I'd been to Florida many, many, many times because my mother lived down here, but never having been to Miami Beach, I thought, oh man.
Wait, so you're not originally from Florida?
No, I'm originally from outside of Detroit, Michigan.
Okay, so you were born in Detroit?
Detroit, Rock City.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So you said your mom was in Florida. Were your parents not together?
No, my parents weren't together. My parents had divorced when I was really young. So, my mom moved to Florida, ironically enough, right after I had graduated from high school. So I was sort of on my own in Michigan for a couple of years at college, and then I just decided I'd had it. I'd had it with the winter. I'd had it with the cold. I was done. So after a couple of years up in Michigan at college, I called Mom and I said, hey, coming on down, using your address. Got to get into school down there. And Florida State had a good program. I went and checked out the campus. I couldn't believe my eyes. Lots of beautiful students there, if you will. I really liked it. It was
for sure.
Really,
Florida is a melting pot.
It was pretty cool. So ultimately, I ended up going to school there for 3 years and graduated. And when I had an opportunity to get that internship in Miami Beach, man, I jumped all over it because I was like, oh, I got to go check out Miami Beach. And when I came down here, my eyes about fell out of my head.
Wow.
Dude, the music, the sounds, the color of the ocean, the palm trees, the sand, the beach. South Beach was kind of really turning a corner at that point, so it was becoming a really sort of discovered gem and really just a hip place. And the women from South America, you don't see that stuff from
it's
Michigan. And I'm
sure.
just saying, just the people in general, just the different cultures and
exactly.
the Latin culture. I loved it. I loved the music. I loved the cuisine. I loved everything about it. I loved the colors, the history, the art.
Is the production studio still open? The one you interned at?
No, the one ironically enough, the one I interned at was a company that just kind of was starting up, itself. It was called Walk on Water Productions.
Interesting
and
name.
They did everything production-wise, either on water or underwater. And I just got an internship there. And I remember the very first commercial I did was a huge Diet Coke commercial. And the actor was Judge Reinhold. And a lot of people are like, who is Judge Reinhold? Well, if anybody's seen the movie Fast Times at Ridgemont High, which is like an 80s
classic,
iconic movie, Judge Reinhold was Brad in that movie, and he plays the guy that works at the fish and chips.
He's the lengthy dude,
restaurant.
right?
He's the lengthy dude.
I see who you're talking about now. His name is Judge.
His name is Judd.
What?
Not Judd. Wait, is it Judd or Judge? No, it is Judge. Yes.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Cool.
Rhymes with fudge. Judge.
Yeah.
It is Judge Reinhold, and a lot of people will remember him as that guy that was looking at Phoebe Cates coming out of the pool through the bathroom window.
The jerk-off scene. Oh, my gosh, yo, that scene, man, is that classic.
Yes. So when I saw Judge Reinhold, I thought, oh, my God, I've made it. There he is. There he is.
So that was your first kind of actor you met on a set?
That was the first kind of actor I met on set. And I wouldn't say I was starstruck, but I just found it so interesting. And this production was huge. It was for Diet Coke. The director back then was a enormous commercial director named Bob Giraldi. Okay. And he had directed all these really famous commercials with soda commercials. I think it was Pepsi with Michael Jackson. He'd done a lot of the Miller Lite commercials with all of the athletes. So everybody knew who he was.
Awesome,
yeah. And there was no expense spared. It was a giant production. It was on water, which made it for production-wise was not easy. So that being my first taste of the industry, I was like, oh my God, this is just incredible. This is Hollywood. This is literally lights, camera, action. Literally.
It's like Los Angeles, but on the East Coast.
Literally. So, so when I saw that, and having been an intern and then being in Miami Beach, I said, man, this is what I want to do. This is definitely going to be it for sure.
Nice.
And I sort of worked my way into the production company. They were pretty cool. They let me each job. They let me be in the lighting department. They let me be in the camera department. They let me be in the prop department. They let me be in production.
Cool.
And when I got into the camera department, I just that parlayed that from my childhood of loving photography and so on and so forth. And so it just made sense to me, and I just really gravitated towards it and loved it. And
I have a similar experience to that, because I also started with photography before I transitioned into the career of trying to be a cameraman. And my end game is to be a DP. But before that, I was a baker, so I wasn't doing anything in the field of cameras and film, any of that stuff. That literally came earlier this year. Like, my first time ever being on set was last December, December 2022, and I was a stills photographer. So that's how I entered this career. Is I went in it through being a BTS stills photographer, which is super fun. You get to be there, you see the director, you see the actors, you see them do their prop, makeup, all that stuff, and you're there and you're capturing, your job is to capture all of the moments. And then, and I used to take pictures. I learned photography on YouTube. I didn't go to school for it. I didn't go to school for this either. Everything I'm learning, just like you, is through my internship that I got here. That put me in all the different departments and learning all the stuff. And the only difference between your story and mine is that I went in saying I wanted to be a DP. Like, I knew from the bat I wanted to be a DP, but I knew I had to go through the entire field to get there, because I need to know lighting, I need to know audio, I need to know how to rig everything and all this stuff. So super interesting.
Well, back, if you wanted to be a DP, back in the days of film, it was you really had to take the steps necessary. You had to build that foundation. You had to understand. Speaking of lighting, you really had to understand lighting and the color of the lights and the intensity of the lights, and in relation to the film stocks, because there was no like today with digital cameras, there was no just changing the color on the spot. You had to photograph that image the way you wanted it to be right then and there. And then in a couple days after after processing, you got a chance to look at it to make sure it was what you wanted, look-wise, it was in focus, it was operated properly. So that's why in the days of film there were a lot of tests, testing shot beforehand. Makeup,
and then they used to have a loader just to load and unload film. And there was what was the max time on those things, like on a film? Of recording time, or like half an hour or something?
No, I wish. In 35 millimeter, you would have a 400-foot roll, or you would have a 1,000-foot roll. And if you shot at the sort of typical frame rate of 24 frames a second, which is real-time motion, a 400-foot roll would last about, it's 90 feet a minute, so 90
feet a minute?
90 feet a minute, so it would last.
Bro, that's like 4 minutes.
Yeah. Well, 9 times 4 is 36, so it would last a little over 4 minutes in a 400-foot roll, and you'd get about 11 minutes out of a 1,000-foot roll.
What?
I remember that being the math. It's been a long time since I've had to do it, but I remember that being it, yeah.
Damn, now I see why there's so much film for one movie. I'm like, why is there so many films?
Ironically enough, I remember 16 millimeter was 36 feet a minute, so you could
that's like 3 times more.
Not quite, but yeah, correct.
Yeah, almost 3 times. Correct. Yeah.
Again, I've forgotten. Me too. It's been a long time since I've had to take off my shoes and socks and count my fingers and toes.
Man. Okay, so what goes next after the commercial? So you do your commercial. You got in your camera department. You love that part of it. When did you get on your first film? And was it Deadly Rivals, your first film?
Well, I mean, according to IMDb, I guess my first film was Deadly Rivals back in the '90s. But Deadly Rivals, I got on as an additional second assistant, meaning that production would have certain shoot days where maybe they would have multiple cameras and they would need additional crew. Mm-hmm. So I'd say that was my first time of really stepping on set of a movie per se.
Gotcha.
And working as a camera assistant in that capacity on a film. And I was second AC.
And what's the difference between second AC and first AC?
Oh, man.
And the jobs. What are the difference of jobs?
Second ACs are worth their weight in gold. I mean, they are basically the managers of the camera department. And basically, a second AC is in charge of all the equipment, in charge of, basically keeping the department running smoothly. What equipment's coming in, what equipment's going out, personnel-wise, do we have multiple cameras? Do we have any specialty equipment? Do we need personnel for that? Mm-hmm. And not only that, and then the main part of the second AC is to support the first AC.
Which is what a focus puller is as well.
Correct, a first AC/focus puller. So the second AC will definitely support the first, making sure the first has everything that they need, so they can basically just pull focus and
not have to worry about anything else.
And tend to the director of photography, who ultimately is attending to the director. So it just works its way up in an upward sort of motion. So second AC. Back when I was doing it, especially on commercials, you were the second AC / film loader. You did not get a film loader.
Okay.
So
that just all fell under the AC job.
So that all just fell under being the second AC. So sometimes you'd have to tell your focus puller, you'd have to say, hey, I got to step off set, I got to reload some mags, or we're going to run out. And the first AC would, not like being on set by themselves. Having to toe the line by themselves until you got back, but that's just the way it was, on commercials. Yeah. So on feature films, however, you would definitely have a dedicated film loader for sure.
Yeah, and that would also depend on budget too, or for sure they're going to have a film loader when you start getting into those?
No. Feature films...
they have the budget for that.
I guess if they had a low budget, they would have. It wasn't unheard of where the second AC would also have to go and load, in addition to being a second. That would happen if it was maybe a one camera show where it wasn't so wouldn't be something almost impossible for a second AC to tend to two cameras and load for two cameras. So it was basically, if it was one camera show, sometimes, yes, you would find the second AC would also be the loader as well.
Gotcha.
But usually feature films, movies of the week back then, some people are saying, what's a movie of the week?
Yeah, what is that? I don't know
what is that? A movie of the week, ironically enough, back in the days of television, sometimes you would get a network like CBS or NBC or ABC. They would show what they would call a movie of the week, which would be a story. Maybe it would be based on a current event, or it would be based on something fictional or whatever, just to kind of break up the monotony of just the network shows every week. So a second AC back then sometimes would have to load, definitely on commercials, but in feature films, you would definitely have a film loader for sure.
Right. And then
not always, but most of the time.
But these were all shot when you did these types of work, the second AC in the 90s. These were all films that were being shot in Miami. The unit part was in Miami.
Yeah, Miami was an amazing market in the 90s and the 2000s, all the way up. I'm going to say, I don't know, maybe till 2016, maybe, till we lost our incentives. But back then, Miami was a great place. It was a jumping off point for the islands. We had beach, we had Everglades, we had metropolitan cities, we had all kinds of different looks. We had the weather.
Yeah.
We had not only different looks location-wise, we had different looks, depending on if you were in Fort Lauderdale or if you were in Miami or if you were in Palm Beach, or you'd get a completely different look.
You got the Everglades if you want to go for
Keys.
swamps.
You know, it was just, it was awesome. At one time, we were literally the third largest market behind LA and New York.
Yeah, I believe it. Yeah, for sure.
It was incredible.
Now I know Atlanta's popping.
Oh, dude. I did a job in Atlanta. I'm trying to think of when this was. I'm probably not correct on this. It's probably been busy Atlanta's probably been doing what they're doing now for probably, I'd say, 15 years. But prior to that, I went up and I did this commercial for Georgia Power and Light. It was just this commercial we did. And I went up there, and it was like a 10-day commercial. And I went into this camera house, and there was one guy working there. There was one camera house in all of Atlanta, and there was one guy working there because there was not much happening there at all.
Yeah, wow.
So I walked in, and he's like, he says to me, "Oh, let me know when you need me. I'm doing lighting and grip and camera. So if you need anything, just let me know. I'll try to get to you when I can." And now it's like, the crew we had, I think there were probably, I'm not exaggerating, I think there were maybe 5 or 6 camera assistants in all of Atlanta.
Wow.
I think there may be as many gaffers. I mean, it was definitely
nothing. Yeah, nothing was happening there.
Nothing like it is now. I think about that, and I think about what Atlanta is now today, and it just blows my mind.
I read it was because
Atlanta literally is truly a boom town.
Yeah,
it is.
Tyler Perry just built like a crazy studio. I read.
Yeah,
over there.
I've been there. I shot there for 5 months. It's beautiful.
At the Tyler Perry studio.
It's beautiful.
What was that like?
I worked in one of the stages there on a show where they had built a tank. It was. I think the tank was 25 feet deep. It was probably, maybe 40 by 40.
What were you shooting?
I was working on a picture that came out a little over a year ago called Wakanda Forever.
Oh, that's where you were shooting Black Panther. Okay, cool.
Underwater.
Yeah, so so you were part of the underwater team for that.
That's right.
So how different is underwater focus pulling versus on land? I'm assuming you're not in the water. There's no way you're pulling focus in the water.
I came into underwater photography, so to speak. I came into it at the right time, because now with digital cameras, I don't need to be in the water.
Yeah.
I don't need to get wet. I don't need to even check the temperature. I don't need to look at it. Nothing.
Yeah, because the monitor is out of the camera. The system's wireless.
Right. The loom, as they call it, which is the cable system that comes out of the camera. It comes from the camera, comes up to the surface, comes right to me, to my little control setup where I control the functions of the camera and the lens control. And it comes to me on a beautiful, beautiful image where I'm high and dry.
Nice.
Yeah, but back then, my hat goes off to the guys back then. I didn't pull focus underwater like some of the pioneers did. These guys, they were underwater.
That must have been tough, man.
Dude, as I referenced earlier about pulling focus in film on set, I had the luxury of being able to take out a tape measure, walk it out, get marks. When you're underwater, those guys didn't have any of that luxury. They had their marks, and they knew what the distances were, and basically, they were just doing everything by eye.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go back to the 90s, specifically 99, which I think is when you had your first job as a first AC focus puller, right? And it was on a film 8mm?
I did work on 8mm. 8mm came here to Miami from, I guess they were shooting in L.A., Nicolas Cage movie.
It's a wild movie, by the way.
Yeah. If you like snuff films, check it out.
That's a wild movie.
But Joel Schumacher was the director. So, and he's
this
a trip.
guy,
he's a trip.
Joel Schumacher, is a trip because he's so different with his movies.
Right.
Like this is the same guy that gave you Batman and Robin.
Yes, I know.
It's pretty crazy.
Where Pee Wee Herman was in Batman.
That is. Man, that is crazy. Okay, so...
No, Joel Schumacher, so they came here and shot second unit, which was additional photography. Now, I didn't get to see or work with Nicolas Cage, but we shot. Was
the director there?
Joel Schumacher was there because we had some of the other principal actors whose names escape me right now. But yeah, Joel Schumacher was on set. They came and shot here for like a week. That was all on film back then.
And then you were focus pulling on that project?
I was one of the additional focus pullers, yes.
Sweet. And that was the first one that you did?
That was probably one of the first ones, yeah.
Okay.
That was one of the first ones. And I remember Joel Schumacher he was the nicest guy. He was the nicest guy.
He seems that way from his interviews,
He came up, he
honest.
says, "Are you on our crew?" And I said, "I am today." And he said, "What about tomorrow?" And I said, "I'll be here all the week unless, so."
Yeah.
So.
That's cool that you get
to. Trip.
I would assume, like, as a director, you kind of have to be, like, a little open, too, because you are kind of like the head. So you kind of have to be able to talk and be able to be talkable, like, to people and not being a complete ass. How are you going to work?
Well, not always. I mean, some directors are more personable. Some directors aren't personable at all. So.
How many directors do you feel like, because I'll plead ignorance here because I had no idea that there was a difference between
ignorance. my wife will tell you that right up front.
My wife will probably say the same thing.
He's ignorant, and don't even ask my kids.
But before I got into the field and realized how much different jobs that we just went through, how many different jobs you can do in the film set, I just assumed the director was the one that was operating the camera, and I didn't realize that a lot of directors don't necessarily operate the cameras. And I wanted to know from your experience working with directors, is that something that you noticed, that our directors, do they like to be behind the camera, or do they like to just be the eye that sees everything instead?
So funny, I always reference everything as to, back in the day or today. But, years and years ago, the directors had their hands full. I mean, they had their hand. You would never see, at least in my experience, maybe if it happened, I wasn't aware. Certainly I didn't see it, but directors would never operate the camera. The directors of photography would never operate the camera. The camera was operated by camera operators. And, I mean, nowadays, you have directors of photography that also like to operate the camera. You have some directors that like
I know James Cameron loves to operate.
Well, you know what? I've not worked with James Cameron, but what came to mind was Michael Bay. I have done a couple Michael Bay pictures, and he being the director, he would operate the camera.
He's a wild director.
Yeah.
He loves crashing cameras.
I can attest to that personally, yes. I can attest to that personally.
Okay. So we mentioned before you worked with Judge, and you weren't necessarily starstruck by him.
Right.
Is there a job you went on that you were like, wow, this person's in front of me?
Yes.
Who was this actor?
The first...
director.
It's like it happened yesterday. The first actor that I ever got starstruck by was Al Pacino.
Get the fuck out of here.
I was working on a movie directed by Oliver Stone, who was not personable, going back to personal versus not personal directors. He was a total character, but he was not personable. What
film was it? Was this Any Given Sunday?
It was Any Given Sunday.
Oh, sweet. I like that movie.
Yeah. Any Given Sunday, I was the C camera, second AC. That was about the last movie, that and a movie called Wild Things. Those were the two last movies that I did as a second AC. I was the B camera second on Wild Things. I was a C camera second on Any Given Sunday. But we were at a football facility down in Homestead, and we were setting up cameras out on the practice field, and a couple of the guys were throwing the football around and so on and so forth, and I was helping my first assistant get marks. So I was out on the field getting marks, and this ball whizzes over my head, and I turned around, and just as I turned around to see where the ball ended up, because it, I could have easily caught it. But I didn't. I could have easily caught it, And I turned around, and the person who caught it behind me was Al Pacino.
Damn.
And I said, holy shit.
It's the Godfather, bro.
That's fucking Al Pacino. I couldn't believe it.
Wow.
And the thing that kind of struck me is it, you know, this is going to sound so stupid, but it looked just like Al Pacino.
You expected someone
I
else?
was like, wait a minute. No wonder. Al Pacino looks just like Al Pacino. It's the same guy on the screen in all the famous movies.
Yeah.
And, you know, but he was so, you know, I'm 6'2", but he was pretty short. I was like, wow, he's tiny.
Yeah, I heard that about
small.
Tom Cruise.
He's small.
Apparently, he's super short.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously, I've never seen the guy, but
I had a chance to work with him once, but it fell through, and the shoot never materialized. But,
oh, okay.
Yeah, Al Pacino, I was definitely starstruck by.
Did you guys does he talk? I mean, how are these?
He loved throwing the ball around with with a lot of the players and the receivers and some of the quarterbacks, because, you know, a lot of guys on that movie
were athletes.
You know, were definitely athletes. They definitely had football experience. They definitely had, you know, collegiate, maybe a short-lived cup of coffee, maybe in the Canadian Football League, or you know.
Was Jamie Foxx there?
Jamie Foxx was there. LL Cool J was there. Yeah.
Yeah. Jamie Foxx was good in that movie, man.
Yeah. But
my name is Willie.
You know,
Willie Beeman.
Willie Beeman. Yeah. But you know, Cameron Diaz.
Yeah, she was so bad in the 90s, man.
Man.
Oh my gosh.
I tell you what. Who else? I wasn't really starstruck, but I kept staring at her. Was Anne Margaret. Anne Margaret. You're probably thinking, who's Anne Margaret?
Yeah,
Anne Margaret is a very, very famous actress from like back in the 60s, and maybe even earlier. She's a redhead. She's in a lot of Elvis movies.
Okay.
And she was, you know, wink, wink, rumored to have had an affair at one point with Elvis. And I am a huge Elvis fan. So every time I looked at Anne Margaret, I was like, God damn.
You could have slept with the king.
She fucked Elvis.
Yeah. Oh, imagine that for Marilyn Monroe. Damn, you fucked the president.
Oh, I know. But, you know, I had a chance to work with Al Pacino on a second project called Two for the Money. And that was a movie about sports gambling.
That one's good. That one's with Matthew McConaughey.
And that was up in Vancouver.
That one's good.
And I actually got to go up to Vancouver for 6 weeks and do all the football footage up there as a special, quote unquote, special sports focus puller. They let me into the country.
Gotcha.
So But that's who immediately comes to mind when you say, were you starstruck?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely. I mean, what a story! You turn around and it's Al fucking Pacino.
Oh,
like,
man, dude,
the only other person at the time I feel like that could have been that kind of like. It would be Robert De Niro.
Yeah, and you know, and I knew the people that were in the movie, so on and so forth, because you know you get the call sheet, and back then they weren't like, you know, they literally had the cast.
Do you get the script too sometimes or no?
I did. You know, I used to get them mailed to me, hard copy, with.
Were they printed on red paper?
They were no, mine were printed on white paper, and they would be in these giant binders, and I actually still have a couple of them. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice. Mm-hmm. So did you get to work with him again on The Irishman? Al Pacino was in that movie.
Yeah, but sadly I did not. I did again. They came down here for second unit for a week. That's as close as I've ever gotten to a Martin Scorsese.
Was he here?
Experience? No, sadly.
So
he was not.
It was a completely second unit. None of the principal guys were there.
Some of the
younger
some of
stars.
The lower. I hate to say it like that. But some of the lower principals that were further down on the call sheet with double-digit numbers, like not number 1, not number 2, not number, but maybe like number 12, number 13, number 14. But they came down, and that was awesome because it was a period piece. The stuff that they were shooting down here with old wardrobe, cars.
Cool. So what's some of the places you got to travel to? Like, what's the furthest place you went for work?
Well, I've been to Europe a number of times. I feel like I've been to, every island in the Caribbean. I've been to South America. I've been to Central America, all over the United States. I've been to Canada. I've not been to Asia.
Oh, okay, cool.
So
I would have assumed you might have ended up there at one point.
Yeah, I would love to go. I would love to check it out, but I've not been to Asia. I don't know if this is the furthest location because I've been to Budapest, just by as the crow flies. I don't know if Rome is further or Paris or some of the other places I've been. But I ended up going on a huge, crazy, to this day, sometimes people say, what's the hardest job you were ever on? And immediately I say, this job I did in Angel Falls, Venezuela, way down there, almost to Brazil.
Okay.
Yeah. So this commercial.
Angel Falls, is that the big waterfall that's from up?
It is, yes. That's the waterfall.
The one that the water doesn't hit the bottom.
It does.
Oh, it does. Okay.
Eventually. It's literally the highest. It's the highest.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about now.
In the world.
Wow.
And some people actually call it the eighth wonder of the world. It's insane. It's I forget how high it is, but it's. I want to say it's a mile up there.
And you were shooting a commercial, a film?
This is totally ridiculous. We went down there for 14 days to shoot a commercial about a cigarette.
Nice, fancy. Holy shit. Is it
that,
Marlboro?
It was, no, the Marlboro man was not there.
They had good commercials back then.
Yeah,
I loved them. They were so Western.
It was. I'm gonna say I don't know if it was cooler than a Marlboro commercial, but it could have been as cool. It was for a tobacco out of India called Dajarum. I don't know if you've ever heard of Dajarum. 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 The D's not silent. Neither is the J. The J's not silent. You got to pronounce it. But we went down to Angel Falls. It took us 3 days to get there. We took down 5 film cameras, boxes and boxes and boxes of film, all the support. I had to prep for an insane amount of water. I had to prep for rigging. I had to prep for helicopter. I had to prep for airplanes. I had to prep helmet cams for people jumping out of airplanes. The whole commercial, the premise of this commercial was these 3 guys. They're climbers, right? They're climbers, and they're what are the guys that jump off the top of buildings and they have the wingsuits on? What are those guys?
Oh man, it slips me. But yeah, I know what you're talking about.
I can't remember. Base jumpers.
Yes,
base jumpers. Sorry.
Yeah, with the wingsuits like the squirrel ones.
So this whole premise of this commercial was these 3 base jumpers were climbing from the base of Angel Falls, as the story goes, to the top. Their journey to the top of Angel Falls, and then they base jump off the top of Angel Falls. And they glide their way down, parachute their way into the water, and it's a successful journey. It's an amazing trip that they've been practicing for and prepping for. And to celebrate,
they have a cigarette.
They light up with Dajarum cigarettes.
Damn. Yeah. I think to celebrate victory and a great moment than Dajarum cigarettes.
Yes. So just the logistics of that job. I remember them asking me, they said, so what's your rate? And I told them what my rate was. And they said, no. What's your 16-hour rate? And I said, I don't think I've ever done a 16-hour rate. And they said, well, basically, we're working 16 hours every day from the time you get up to the time you wrap is going to be 16 hours. And we don't want to pay overtime. So they said, what's your 16-hour rate? And, back then, I, for one, had never been asked for my 16-hour rate. So I was like, okay, what's my rate for 10? And I said, $1,000 for 16. And they said, $1,000 for 16? And I said, yeah, think about the overtime, it comes out to more than that with overtime. So $1,000 for 16. So I said, yeah, I was thinking in my mind, they're never going to go for this. And they kind of scoffed at it, and I just sort of was very explanatory about all the things that I had to do.
Yeah,
and
it's a lot of work, bro.
Make sure nothing ran amiss or broke down or went wrong, because what are you going to do? Make a phone call and say, "Hey, man, can you guys send me another something,
so I was
something?
gonna
I'm
ask
down
that.
here in Angel Falls." You wouldn't
What's
get
the
it for a
closest?
week.
I mean, what were you guys in Angel Falls? Where were you guys staying? Did you guys have to build tents? What's the closest town?
Hold on. Yeah, that's a great story. So 5 cameras, just the logistics of the job. I asked for 3 days to prep everything, to prep all of the water protection so that we could shoot in the water. We could shoot getting pounded on by water from the falls, everything. So, they said, okay. So, so I was like, all right, at least I know I'm making this amount every day. And believe me, it was a beat down. It was easily, physically, mentally, just everything. Check all the boxes. One of the hardest jobs I've ever done. It was just insane. But to answer your question about where did we stay, once we got down there to Angel Falls, we stayed at our base camp. I'd say maybe about a quarter, maybe a half mile away from the falls. And we basically stayed in these native sort of makeshift housing where a lot of people who would come there to rock climb or to base jump or whatever, you would stay in these. I just called them huts.
Gotcha.
Because they weren't real structures, but they had bunks in them. So like in our hut, we had a row of 4 beds on the bottom, 4 on top. 8 guys stayed in one place.
So let me ask you this: you've done a lot of projects where you're like second unit. Is there a project that you did when you were in it from start to finish?
Oh yeah, many.
Okay, so
Many.
when you've done a job like this and
Many.
you see the movie in the release,
Yes.
does it have something you're like, oh man, I shot this movie. It came out so good, because you don't know what the movie's gonna be like when you're shooting it. You don't know, you're not part of the editing. So
Right.
when you watch the movie in the theater or at your house, you'll be like, oh man, I remember shooting that scene, and look at that, I hit the focus.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
is there a time you watched one of your movies, you're like, fuck, I didn't realize I missed the focus?
Well, the first time, when you asked me, you said, based on like you don't know how it's going to be edited, you don't know how it's going to turn out, you don't know how it's going to come out. The first thing that came to my mind was a show called Dexter.
Oh yeah, I love that show.
And that was on Showtime, and I worked on the pilot and the first 4 episodes of that show. And the reason why I didn't work more than the first 4 episodes is because we had, in Florida, we had 3 hurricanes back to back to back that year. And it shut our production down,
You had to move to LA, right?
Each time. And they were just like, we're out of here. We're not going to be able to insure this. So we're going to go shoot in LA. Ironically enough, it pissed off the lead actor. He didn't want to go to LA because he lived on the East Coast. He lived in North Carolina. He's like, I love shooting in Florida. I can just buzz home for the weekend in North Carolina.
Yeah, talk about Michael Hall, right?
Michael Hall. And, so I worked on the pilot and the first 4 episodes, and that was back right when digital photography cameras were coming out. And so on that show, we shot film in the daytime and we shot digital at night. And that was back when you had to make sure all the lenses were back focused, the cameras were back focused. You had to do that at lunch. You had to do that before, if the temperature changed, all that stuff. So to answer your question, we're working on this, and and we're shooting all this gore and all these bloody scenes, and like there's just this table with knives and saws and chisels and hammers. I'm like, what the fuck? What the fuck are we shooting? This guy never says anything. He doesn't talk. He doesn't have any dialogue. He just fucking hacks people all
he's
up.
Crazy, bro.
He just carves in. He drains the blood. He dumps everything. I'm like, what the? And then he's just like mild mannered, whatever during the day. I'm like, what are we doing? I had no idea it was going to be,
a big hit.
A lot of it was voiceover, and a lot of the dialogue of what his character was saying and doing was in his head, right?
Right.
I had no idea. I was like, what are we doing? And, eventually, I got the premise of it, and I was like, oh, okay. And wow, what a hit.
Yeah,
but a lot of people, you know, when they look at my resume, if you will, and they see Dexter, they're like, "Oh, you worked on Dexter." And
I mean, you do have a pretty nice filmography.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
So
then the other one, sorry, to answer your question, the other one that I worked on from start to finish that was a really, really great movie that you know, everybody enjoyed, and I was so. I answer this with this movie because my parents liked it, my relative liked it, my family liked it. It was something that everybody could go see, and they were just. It was a really, really good movie. It was called Marley and Me.
Okay, I know the movie. That movie made a lot of people cry.
Yeah, man. Especially if you're a dog lover, and I, you know, when we shot that scene, Marley and Me with Jennifer Aniston and Owen Wilson, who were two very super nice. They could not have been nicer to the crew. Jennifer Aniston was like, for the superstar she was, she couldn't go anywhere. We had to. You know, protect her from paparazzi like every day, all day. And
wow.
She was just so cool, so humble to everybody. But you know, when that movie came out, I was really proud to have worked on that because, you know, that was something that my mom and dad could see, my family could see.
Yeah, it's a family movie.
It
Everybody
wasn't
can
this
watch it.
crazy drug, shoot 'em up, hacking, Dexter, stuff that, you know, my parents or my family would be like, it's not really my kind of movie. But so when I could say, hey, go see Marley and Me, you know, that was something that, anyway, so that came to mind. But shooting that scene where they had to sadly put the dog down at the end, it was just one camera in that room. And
you were pulling focus on that one?
I was the focus puller on it because the focus puller was not able to do that scene.
Too emotional?
No, she was not able to be on set because she was sick and she was not able to be there. So I took over. It was just one camera, and I remember Owen Wilson saying, "Guys, let's put a 1,000-foot roll of fresh. Make sure we have a fresh 1,000-footer. I mean, we would anyway, but let's make sure we have a fresh 1,000-foot roll because I'm gonna do this a couple of times. I think that's all I'm gonna be able to do. And let's make sure we capture it. If I need to go back, I just want to have one roll of film. I don't want to reload and redo this over and over and over." So, you know, so we're in there. We're doing this scene where we're, you know, sadly putting this dog to sleep. And you know, and as it's happening, this is no joke. As it's happening, we have a rep from PETA, which is the dog animal protection,
to make sure not harming the animals on set.
Right. We had a vet, a real vet in there to say, okay, this is how we would euthanize. This is how we would do it. This is what we would do, so on and so forth. The gaffer was in there, the camera operator, you know, everybody was bawling.
Yeah.
And this is not even a real, you know, but it looked and felt and seemed so real. Everybody was crying. My operator literally was sniffling at the eyepiece, and he was, you know, trying to wipe his nose as he was crying. People say, "Didn't you cry?" I didn't cry at all. I didn't well up at all. I was so making sure that I did not be the one to have to say, we got to do this again.
Right, yeah, especially when Owen Wilson says, put a fresh one because I don't want to fucking do it again.
I was dialed in, and we shot the medicine going down the tube into the dog, Owen's hand stroking the dog, close-up of him crying to the dog's face. We were operating all over. I mean, you know, my margin for error on that was not a lot. It wasn't slim. It wasn't crazy, you know, slim or anything like that. But, you know, my margin for error was not a lot. So I was basically just really intense on that scene. So I didn't really have time to cry or think about crying or whatever. But everybody was bawling in that scene. Yeah.
Is that the movie you would say you're the proudest of? Like when you think of your filmography, you're like, damn, I'm really proud of this movie.
I think so. Just in terms of, I worked on it the entire time. My operator was an amazing, amazing operator. He had just come off of Batman: The Dark Knight with Christopher Nolan and Wally Pfister, and he had just talked about they were one of, if not the first, one of the first people to ever utilize an IMAX camera on a Steadicam rig. And
Nolan's notorious for using.
But it had never
IMAX
really been
cameras.
done because those IMAX cameras were freaking huge.
Yeah, and they make
were
huge sound, too.
heavy. And so he literally, the camera operator, Steadicam guy, he literally had to have special equipment made just to be able to support that camera and the weight of the camera. So, and he won Operator of the Year for it. So, I mean, I had a heavy hitter operator who, thank God, was super nice, Steadicam operator as well, who, when we did Steadicam, he was the B camera Steadicam guy. We had two major actors. The director was David Frankel, who was a big-time director. And a lot of the shots that I did they were tough. Long lens, film, dogs, big-time actors. Not that they wouldn't do several takes if needed, but the director, you're not going to want to do a lot of takes, right? I mean, so, everybody had to definitely make sure they were on top of their game. But mostly, like I said, because that was a film that, I could say to anybody without being worried of saying, it's a little gory, or, it's a
There's
little
a lot
offensive,
of cursing,
or, it's a
yeah.
lot of language, or, it's a lot, it was really just a good, wholesome movie that everybody could go see.
It was.
Correct.
It was a really good movie. Those tear-jerker movies, they can hit home sometimes.
Yeah, correct.
So let me ask you, you've also worked on films like Bad Boys and a lot of the films that are shot here in Miami.
Yeah.
On Bad Boys, for example, were you also a first AC?
I was, yes.
And are you part of the first unit or second unit?
First unit, yes.
Okay. So what's the difference between the units? When you say your first unit and then your second unit on something else, what does that mean? Are you not working with the principal actors if you're in the second unit, or what does that mean?
Well, you do get to work with principal actors and the lead actors, frankly. You do get to work with them on second unit. But basically, first unit, in a nutshell, you could say first unit is with principal actors. Second unit is stuff that the principal actors aren't going to do, like stunts or, something where you don't necessarily need the principal actors, but you need to shoot these scenes to sort of tie in the stories, the scenes between both units. But, second unit is basically stuff that the first unit just schedule-wise doesn't really have time to shoot. There's so much that needs to be shot in accordance to the story or the plot or whatever it is, that it takes multiple units to get everything done. So you have a second unit or an additional unit to shoot that stuff. Sometimes there's what's called as a splinter unit. Splinter unit will shoot like for example, inserts of like an actor, dialing a phone instead of, the first unit shooting the actor actually holding a phone and dialing it. They'll have a splinter unit come in with a hand model or a stand-in whose hand looks the same, and they'll just shoot the hand and the phone.
So that's what they do.
Just
That's
stuff like
crazy.
that. Yeah,
so sometimes it's not even Will Smith's hand holding the phone. It could be someone else's.
That's right. Yeah, it could be mine. No, I wouldn't.
Yeah, I mean-
I wouldn't be a good match.
You'd be like the first black
I
hand.
wouldn't. I wouldn't be a good match.
Okay, so when you mentioned earlier that you worked on Michael Bay with some Michael Bay films, those were the films, the Bad Boy movies?
Correct. The second one and the third one, which is ironically called Bad Boys for Life. But
And they're making a fourth
it's
one.
the third in the series. That's what I hear. I also, I heard they're making a fourth one.
So you worked on all three?
I haven't heard that they're shooting it in Florida. I doubt that they will because we just don't have the production incentives here.
Yeah.
But maybe they'll come here for a cup of coffee and get a couple things.
Gotcha. So I was gonna say,
I only worked on the second one and the third one. I did not work on the first one.
oh, so you didn't work on the first one?
No.
Okay, so we're in the second one. So when you work on a movie like Bad Boys 2 and then you work on the third one, are you called back because of the work you did on the first one, or are you just part of like that crew that's in Florida? You're one of the top focus pullers or whatever, and they're like, okay, so whenever we go to Florida, we're just gonna call up Mike. He'll be our focus puller, or how does that work?
Yeah, I didn't get on the third one because I worked on the second one. I ended up getting on the third one to say yes because I'm one of the focus pullers in South Florida that has feature experience. I don't know if it helped or not, but yes, I did work on the second one. Although, Michael Bay directed the second one, he did not direct the third one. So
That's why it looks so different.
But I also knew some of the guys that were in the camera department on Bad Boys for Life that were shooting up in Atlanta, and they said, "Hey, we're coming to Miami. Would you be interested and available for these dates?" So I said, yeah. So I did, when they came down here, I did C camera. I was a C camera focus puller down here on Bad Boys for Life. And it was only, they were only here for a couple of weeks. It wasn't anything crazy.
And who calls you? You have an agent?
No, I don't have an agent. If there's agents out there listening, I don't have an agent, but it's just, word of mouth.
Gotcha.
And
what about the union? I hear a lot about the union talk, and I have to say again, I'm going to remain ignorant because being from Haiti and stuff like that, and just not knowing what union is. How does that affect a person that wants to get jobs in the industry? Do you need to be part of a union?
No,
is it necessary?
No, you don't need to be in the union. As a matter of fact, Florida, where we are, is a right-to-work state, so you don't have to be in the union, or a union, rather, to work here in the state of Florida. But if you want to work on union shows or union jobs, you're required to be union. That's correct.
Okay.
I happen to be in the Cinematographers Union Local 600. And, unions, they protect the wages of the workers. They protect the working conditions. They provide for, if you're gonna work our crew X amount of hours, you're gonna pay them this much. They're required to get so much sleep. They're required to get for breaks for meals and so on and so forth.
So they just make sure you get treated properly.
Yes, that's the theory. Correct. That, and as you work for many years, you get insurance, health insurance for you and your family through the union. You have a pension.
So why not more people, or people not want to join? What would be a reason why not to join a union, for example? Because if they have all these great benefits, I'm assuming people would want to join unions. And I've known that some people don't join unions. Would there be a reason why?
Well, there's a cost to join the union. There's a initiation fee, if you will, to join the union. Also, it's really difficult to try and tell somebody in states like Florida that don't have the production incentives and we don't have the volume of union work down here. It's kind of hard to convince them. Say, hey, man, you should join the union. Why? Well, do you work on union shows? Well, there are no union shows down here anymore. So.
But what if you wanted to work on a job that had you, and you have to join a union to do that, right? So if you wanted to go work on a film or show in Los Angeles or Atlanta, that's union.
You beat me to it. I was about to say, if your goal, if you're going to move to Atlanta, if you're going to move to Georgia, if you're going to move to LA or New York or another union market where there's a lot of shows, there's a lot of union work in Chicago. They do tons of television in Chicago. New York as well, a mixed bag in LA between features and TV. Georgia, everybody knows what that is. Everything shoots there. If you're going to work in those markets, I would say you'd be a fool not to join the union, because you're going to join the union, you're going to get your hours that qualify you for insurance. You're gonna have money contributed into your pension account if you continue to make this a career and you ultimately end up retiring. You'll have a pension to withdraw from in your retirement. You'll have insurance for you and your family. You'll get a union wage. You won't even have to worry about saying, hey, this is my rate. It is.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So, other things that protect you, like, turnaround time for rest, lodging if it's a distant location, meal breaks, stuff like that. So, but it's so hard to justify joining a union. I hate saying that, but it's so hard to justify that joining a union down here in Florida because we just don't have the union work like we used to.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier in the interview, we were the third largest market down here. It was we had so much work. We had TV shows, pilots, feature films, documentaries.
Do you think it's because they took out that tax rebate write-off they used to give for films back in the day?
It all happened because a couple of governors ago, they decided that we're going to do away with the film production incentive, and when they did away with it,
there goes all the film production.
It just left as a result. I mean, why come here and shoot and pay full price when you can go elsewhere and get your rebates or your tax breaks?
So what's next for Mike? What do you got next coming up? What's your next project?
Well,
are you allowed to discuss it?
Well, as we speak, here we sit in the writer's strike.
Right, there is a strike.
So
man.
Strike,
a lot of movies got put on hold. I just read about that.
Yeah, I had a project that I was going to do in Pittsburgh that's on indefinite hold now because the writer's strike.
So writer's strike fucked up Quantum of Solace back in 2008.
Well, we got the writer's strike now. The Actors Guild and the DGA is also talking about, supporting the writers, which, I'm all for solidarity. I mean, I'm not blaming the writers. I mean, these studios, they're making so much money. Mm-hmm. And, the writers have said, hey, we're not getting our due compensation, and on top of it, we need protection moving forward because who's to say? And again, I'm probably getting way ahead of myself here, but based on where we sit now and are talking, there's artificial intelligence. Writers are worried about, hey, are you going to start using AI to write your scripts? I mean, you're going to want to put us out of a job, or,
that's pretty. Yeah, man.
This whole technical, advance that we're all going through, not only with equipment, but now, my God, you can just go on to an AI platform and say, hey, I want a script about a comedy, about a guy who does this and a girl who does that, and in a work situation like this and in an environment like this, and AI will spit something out for you.
Yeah, and it'll be good most of the time, I guess. Or I don't know. I don't know. I'm assuming it's good. It's AI. It's artificial intelligence.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I would assume it's good.
So make a long story short, to circle back, so right now I'm just biding my time and just enjoying my family and hanging out and me time right now. But until the writer's strike.
How long do you think it's going to go for?
I don't know. The last time it happened, it was 100 days. So I don't know.
When was the last time?
The last time
it was. I know there was one in 2008, but I don't know if there was one after that.
It was a number of years ago. Yes, it was a number of years ago. And some people say that strike that happened is the reason why we have reality TV today, because studios needed content, so they were like, well, let's do this thing called reality TV, where we just give these people a bunch of cameras in a house and let them record themselves.
Oh my God!
So
like Jersey Shore and shit. Fuck. Why did they have to go on strike and have that show come on? Mm-hmm. All right, Mike. Well, I really appreciate you coming on.
Don't even tell me. Are we at the end?
Yeah, we're at the end. We gotta wrap it up.
How is that possible?
We got to wrap it up, man. We got a long day ahead of us. I want you to get back to your family.
Is there a part two? Is there a part two?
Yeah, we can definitely do a part two.
Is there a sequel?
I mean, I'm sure you have tons of stories we have not yet to discuss.
Is there a bottle of bourbon or something waiting for me at the end of this rainbow? Or what?
Oh, maybe next time I'll treat you to something.
Dude, that's
we
what
can
we got.
get some social lubricants.
That's what we got to do is sit down and have a little cocktail and
really
that would
get
be
fun.
Loose. Really
Next time for sure we'll do that, and we can talk about more crazy stories that you probably didn't discuss on the.
Oh
on
man,
I love.
as anybody can tell you, I'm kind of long-winded sometimes, but man, I had so much fun. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm sad that it's over. I'm genuinely sad.
We'll do it again, sir. No worries.
OliverStoned, everybody.
Yeah, OliverStoned.
OliverStoned.
All right, everybody, have a good one. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the OliverStoned Podcast. Safe journeys across the stars.